She could feel their eyes boring into her back, cold and calculating, as she walked into the ornate conference room of Harrington and Phillips law firm. The weight of their judgment was almost as suffocating as the heavy black dress she'd chosen for the occasion. Eliza Thornton knew today would be difficult, the reading of her father-in-law's will, but nothing could have prepared her for the storm brewing in the eyes of her husband's siblings. She took a deep breath and squeezed her husband James' hand, a silent plea for strength. "You don't belong here," Rebecca whispered, just loud enough for Eliza to hear as she passed. The words sliced through her like a knife, but Eliza kept her head high, her face a careful mask of dignified grief. The morning had started with such promise. Eliza hadn't anticipated the day would end with her marriage being tested and family secrets spilling onto the polished mahogany table of the most prestigious law firm in Boston. The tension in the air was palpable as everyone took their seats around the massive table. Samuel Thornton had been dead for exactly 1 week, and already the vultures were circling. Eliza observed them all through lowered lashes. Rebecca, the eldest, with her perfect blonde hair and perpetual sneer. Michael, nursing what was clearly not his first drink of the day despite it being barely noon, and Thomas, the youngest, whose eyes darted nervously between his siblings and his phone. James sat beside her, his jaw clenched so tight she worried he might crack a tooth. Mr. Harrington cleared his throat and adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses. "Thank you all for coming today. As you know, we're here to discuss the last will and testament of Samuel Edward Thornton." His voice was practiced and smooth, betraying no emotion as he began to read from the thick document before him. Eliza found herself drifting, remembering the first time she'd met Samuel. Unlike his children, he had welcomed her with open arms when James brought her home. "About time my son found someone with both beauty and brains," he had said, kissing her cheek. That was 3 years ago, before the cancer diagnosis, before the long nights at the hospital, before she'd abandoned her fledgling career as an art historian to help care for him in his final months. "And to my daughter-in-law, Eliza," Mr. Harrington's voice cut through her memories, bringing her sharply back to the present. "I leave my collection of first edition classics, my summer home in Nantucket, and 20% of my holdings in Thornton Enterprises." The room fell silent for 1 heartbeat, then 2, before erupting into chaos. "This is outrageous." Rebecca slammed her hand down on the table. "She's been married to James for what, 2 years? And she gets Nantucket? The house that's been in our family for generations." 3 years, James corrected, his voice dangerously calm. 3, 2, what difference does it make? Michael jumped in, his words slightly slurred. "We all know why she stuck around to wipe Dad's ass during chemo. She was playing the long game." Eliza felt the blood drain from her face. "That's not true," she whispered, but her voice was lost in the growing argument. "Dad wasn't thinking clearly," Thomas added, finally looking up from his phone. "The medication, the pain, he wasn't in his right mind when he made these changes." Mr. Harrington raised his hand. "I can assure you, Mr. Thornton was of sound mind when he updated his will 6 months ago. He was very specific about his wishes." 6 months ago? Rebecca's eyes narrowed as she turned her gaze to Eliza. "Right around the time you started spending every day at his bedside, wasn't it? How convenient." James stood up so quickly his chair toppled backward. "That's enough, Rebecca. Eliza gave up everything to care for Dad when the rest of you were too busy to even visit him regularly." "Oh, please," Rebecca scoffed. "Don't be naive, James." She saw an opportunity and she took it. Classic gold digger move. "She's not even from our world." Eliza felt something snap inside her. After months of grief, exhaustion, and now this public humiliation, something primal and fierce awakened. She stood up slowly, straightening her spine and looking Rebecca directly in the eye. "I loved your father," she said, her voice steady despite the trembling in her hands. "He was more of a parent to me in 3 years than my own father was in 30. I sat with him through chemo treatments while you were on vacation in the Maldives. I read to him when his eyes were too weak to read himself. I held his hand when he was scared, and yes, I did help bathe him when he was too weak to do it himself, something he said you found too distressing to handle, Rebecca." The room fell silent, all eyes on Eliza. I never asked for anything. I never expected anything. If you think I spent the last year of my life watching the man I loved like a father waste away because I wanted his money or his property, then you don't know me at all. Her voice finally broke on the last word, tears threatening to spill. James reached for her hand, but before he could speak, Rebecca laughed, a cold, brittle sound that echoed in the quiet room. What a performance. Dad always said you studied art, but clearly you should have gone into acting. Rebecca turned to Mr. Harrington. We'll be contesting this will, of course. There's no way Dad intended to leave such valuable assets to someone who's practically a stranger. James slammed his fist on the table. Enough. You will not speak to my wife that way. Dad knew exactly what he was doing. If you contest this will, you'll be going against his explicit wishes. Is that how you want to honor his memory? Eliza felt the room spinning. The wall seemed to be closing in as the siblings continued to argue. Without a word, she grabbed her purse and fled the room, desperate for air, for space, for anywhere that wasn't filled with the toxic hatred emanating from the people who should have been her family. She made it to the hallway before the tears came, hot and fast. Leaning against the cool marble wall, she tried to catch her breath, tried to make sense of what had just happened. She had spent the last year of her life dedicated to making Samuel's final days comfortable and dignified. She had held his hand as he took his last breath, had closed his eyes when he was gone. And this was her reward, to be branded a gold digger, a manipulative outsider. The door to the conference room burst open, and James appeared, his face flushed with anger. Eliza, he started, reaching for her. Don't, she stepped back, wiping at her tears. Just don't. I can't do this right now. I'm so sorry, he said, running a hand through his dark hair. They had no right to speak to you that way, to accuse you of. But they did. Eliza cut him off. And this isn't the first time, James. They've never accepted me, never thought I was good enough for you or your family. I was just too blind to see how deep their resentment ran. James looked stricken. What are you saying? I'm saying I need some time. I can't be around them right now. I can't be in that room, listening to them twist your father's final wishes into something ugly. She took a deep breath. I'm going home. Finish this without me. Eliza, please. I need some time, James. She turned and walked away, her heels clicking on the marble floor, each step taking her further from the nightmare behind her. The taxi ride home was a blur. Eliza stared out the window, watching the elegant buildings of downtown Boston give way to the tree-lined streets of Cambridge. She and James had bought their Victorian townhouse just after getting married, a fixer-upper that they had poured their hearts into renovating. It had been their sanctuary, their fresh start. Now, as the taxi pulled up to the curb, it felt like a mirage, the promise of happiness just out of reach. Inside, Eliza kicked off her heels and collapsed onto the couch, emotionally drained. The house was quiet, too quiet, the silence broken only by the ticking of the antique grandfather clock that Samuel had gifted them as a wedding present. Every home needs a heartbeat, he had said with a wink when they protested that it was too valuable a gift. The memory brought fresh tears to her eyes. She hadn't asked for the Nantucket house. She hadn't asked for any part in Samuel's will. The thought of profiting from his death made her physically ill. All she had wanted was to ensure he didn't suffer, that he wasn't alone. The summer house had been where they'd spent their first Christmas as a married couple, where Samuel had taught her to sail despite James's protests that his father was too weak. Nonsense, Samuel had scoffed. The sea gives me strength. They had talked for hours on the porch overlooking the Atlantic, about art, literature, life. He had become the father she'd never really had. The sound of keys in the door jolted her from her memories. James entered, his tie loosened, his expression unreadable. Eliza sat up, wiping at her tears, suddenly conscious of how she must look, mascara-streaked and disheveled. It's done, he said simply, setting his briefcase down. The reading is complete. And? Eliza asked, not sure what she wanted to hear. James sat down beside her, taking her hands in his. I told them they have a choice. They can accept Dad's will as it is, respecting his wishes and his memory, or they can contest it. But if they contest it, if they continue to disrespect you and what you meant to Dad, then I'm prepared to walk away. Walk away? Eliza echoed, confused. From all of it. The company, the inheritance, the family name. I told them I would rather start from nothing with you than be part of a family that treats you the way they did today. Eliza stared at him, stunned. James, you can't do that. Thornton Enterprises is your legacy, your birthright. No, he said firmly. My legacy is what I choose to make of my life with you. Dad understood that. It's why he changed his will. What do you mean? James took a deep breath. There was more to the will, a personal letter that Dad asked Mr. Harrington to read only after the initial distribution was announced. He knew there would be resistance to you inheriting anything. He knew they hated me that much? Eliza whispered, the pain fresh. Not hate, James said carefully. Fear. Jealousy. Dad saw how they treated you, how they resented the bond you two shared. In his letter, he explained his decisions. He said that in the short time he knew you, you showed more compassion, more integrity, and more loyalty than his own children had in decades. He said leaving you the Nantucket house wasn't about the property. It was about recognizing that you understood what really mattered. Time. Connection. Love. Tears streamed down Eliza's face as James continued. He also said something else, something that shut them up pretty effectively. A small smile played at the corners of his mouth. He said that if anyone contested his will, if anyone challenged what he chose to leave to you, then the entire estate would go to charity. Every penny, every property, every share in the company. Eliza gasped. He wouldn't. Oh, but he would. James actually laughed now. Dad was always 3 steps ahead. He knew exactly what buttons to push. He knew Rebecca and Michael would never risk losing their inheritance completely. And the shares in the company? Why would he leave those to me? I don't know the first thing about running a business. Because he trusted you, James said simply. He told me once that you were the only one who never asked him for anything, who loved him for who he was, not what he could provide. He said that kind of integrity was exactly what the company needed. Eliza leaned back, overwhelmed. So what happens now? Now, James sighed, we wait. They have 24 hours to formally accept the terms of the will or initiate a contest. But given Dad's ultimatum, I think they'll come around. Greed is a powerful motivator. And if they don't, then we build something new together. Dad left us enough to start over if we need to. He squeezed her hands. I'm not afraid of starting over, Eliza. I'm only afraid of losing you. The sincerity in his eyes broke something open inside her, a dam of emotions she'd been holding back. Eliza collapsed against his chest, sobbing, for Samuel, for the ugly scene at the law firm, for the family she'd hoped to be part of but who had never truly accepted her. James held her, stroking her hair, murmuring soothing words until her tears subsided. When she finally looked up at him, his own eyes were red-rimmed but determined. I need to know you're with me in this, he said quietly. Whatever happens. I am, she nodded. Always. I just never wanted to come between you and your family. You didn't. Their own selfishness did that long before you came along. He kissed her forehead. Dad saw something special in you from the beginning. He told me once that I'd better not screw it up because women like you come along once in a lifetime. Despite everything, Eliza laughed. That sounds like him. The rest of the day passed in a strange limbo. They ordered takeout, neither of them having the energy to cook. They talked about Samuel, sharing memories and stories, finding comfort in celebrating his life rather than dwelling on the ugliness that had followed his death. James's phone rang several times. Rebecca, Michael, even Thomas, but he let it go to voicemail, unwilling to deal with them until they had made their decision. As night fell, they sat on their small back patio, glasses of Samuel's favorite scotch in hand. To Dad, James said, raising his glass. Who knew exactly how to throw a grenade into a room even from beyond the grave? Eliza clinked her glass against his. To Samuel, the father I chose. They drank in comfortable silence, watching the stars appear one by one in the darkening sky. Do you think they'll come around? Eliza asked eventually. Not just about the will, but about me? About us. James considered this. Rebecca's pride might be too strong. She's never been good at admitting she's wrong. Michael, he follows Rebecca's lead, always has. Thomas is the wild card. He was closest to Dad. He might be the one to break ranks. I never wanted any of this, Eliza said softly. The money, the house, the shares. I just wanted them to accept me. I know. James took her hand. And that's exactly why Dad knew you deserved it all. The next morning dawned bright and clear, a perfect spring day that seemed at odds with the turmoil they were facing. James made coffee while Eliza showered, trying to wash away the residual tension from the previous day. They had agreed to wait at home for word from Mr. Harrington about the siblings' decision, both of them too drained to face another potential confrontation. James's phone rang just after 10. He answered it on speaker, setting it on the kitchen island between them. James, it's Frederick Harrington. I hope I'm not calling too early. Not at all, Frederick. Eliza's here with me. Good morning, Eliza, the lawyer said, his voice warmer than it had been during the formal reading. I have news. Your siblings have made their decision. They will not be contesting the will. Eliza let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. James's shoulders visibly relaxed. That's good news, James said carefully. Did they say anything else? There was a pause on the other end of the line. Rebecca asked me to convey that while she accepts the terms of the will, she needs time before any family reconciliation. Michael seconded that. Thomas, however, asked if he could call you directly. I believe he may be reaching out separately. I see, James said, his tone neutral. Thank you for letting us know. There's one more thing, Mr. Harrington added. There was a private note to Eliza that your father asked me to deliver only after the matter was settled. I've emailed it to you, Eliza, at the address you provided yesterday. Samuel was very specific that only you should read it. Eliza's heart raced. Thank you, Mr. Harrington. After ending the call, they sat in silence for a moment, processing. Are you going to read it? James asked gently. Eliza nodded, reaching for her laptop on the counter. She opened her email, finding the message from Frederick Harrington at the top of her inbox. With trembling fingers, she clicked on the attachment, a scanned handwritten letter on Samuel's personal stationery. My dear Eliza, asterisk if you're reading this, then two things have happened. I've left this world, hopefully with some dignity intact, thanks to your care, and my children have chosen money over pride. No great surprise there. I want you to know that including you in my will wasn't an impulsive decision or a means to punish my biological children, though I won't deny there's a certain satisfaction in forcing them to acknowledge your worth. Asterisk. Asterisk, you came into our family like a breath of fresh air in a stale room. You loved my son purely, not for his name or his position. You showed me kindness when you had no obligation to do so. You sat with me through the darkest days of my illness when even my own children found excuses to be elsewhere. In you, I found the daughter I always wished I had, curious, compassionate, and courageous. Asterisk. Asterisk, the Nantucket house is yours because that's where I saw you truly come alive, where we connected over our shared love of literature and art. Those books I've left you were never meant to sit on shelves as investments. They were meant to be read, to be cherished, as I know you will cherish them. Asterisk. Asterisk, as for the shares in the company, that decision may surprise you the most. Let me explain. Thornton Enterprises began as a small family business built on integrity and innovation. Over the years, as success came, some of those founding principles were compromised. Rebecca and Michael see the company as a cash cow, nothing more. They don't understand that wealth without purpose is meaningless. Asterisk. Asterisk, I'm entrusting you with those shares not because I expect you to run the company, but because I trust your moral compass. Work with James. Be his conscience when the business world tempts him to take the easy path rather than the right one. Together, you can return Thornton Enterprises to what it was meant to be, a force for positive change, not just profit. Asterisk. Asterisk, there will be difficult days ahead. My children can be stubborn and cruel when they feel threatened. Stand your ground. Remember that you earned your place in this family through love and loyalty, not blood. In time, they may come to see what I saw in you. or they may not. Either way, hold your head high. Asterisk. Asterisk, you once told me that your own father left when you were young, that you grew up without knowing what it meant to have a father's love and guidance. I hope that in our brief time together, I was able to give you some small measure of what you missed. Know that I could not have asked for a more devoted daughter in my final days. Asterisk. Asterisk, take care of my son. Take care of yourself. And whenever you're at the house in Nantucket, have a scotch on the porch at sunset and think of me. Asterisk. With all my love and gratitude. Samuel. Tears streamed down Eliza's face as she finished reading. Wordlessly, she turned the laptop so James could read his father's letter. His own eyes filled as he read, one hand reaching out to grasp Eliza's across the counter. He really loved you, James said when he finished reading, his voice thick with emotion. And I loved him, Eliza whispered. I never expected any of this, James. I just wanted to be there for him, for you. I know. He squeezed her hand. That's why you deserved it all. Dad saw the real you, the you that I fell in love with, the you that his own children were too selfish to appreciate. The doorbell rang, startling them both. They exchanged a glance, neither expecting visitors. James went to answer while Eliza quickly wiped her eyes, closing the laptop. She heard murmured voices in the hallway, then James appeared in the kitchen doorway, his expression a mix of surprise and caution. Behind him stood Thomas, the youngest Thornton sibling, looking uncomfortable and out of place in his designer jeans and cashmere sweater. Thomas wanted to talk to us, James said neutrally. I told him we'd hear what he has to say. Thomas stepped forward, his eyes landing on Eliza. She noticed for the first time how much he resembled Samuel, the same kind eyes, though currently bloodshot and shadowed with what looked like a sleepless night. I came to apologize, he said without preamble. For yesterday, for everything. I should have spoken up when Rebecca and Michael were attacking you. I should have defended you. Dad would have been ashamed of me. Eliza was stunned into silence. Of all the siblings, Thomas had been the least antagonistic, but he had never openly supported her either. Why didn't you? James asked, his tone more curious than accusatory. Thomas sighed, running a hand through his hair, a gesture so like his father's that Eliza felt a pang of grief. Because it's easier to go along with Rebecca than to stand against her. Because I'm a coward. Because... He hesitated. Because I was jealous. Jealous. Eliza found her voice. Of what? Of the relationship you had with Dad. You connected with him in a way I never could. You shared his love of art and literature. You could talk to him for hours about things that just made my eyes glaze over. And he lit up around you. Even when he was in pain, even when the chemo was making him sick, he'd smile when you walked into the room. Thomas's voice broke. My own father, and I couldn't give him that kind of joy. But you could without even trying. Eliza felt her anger melting away, replaced by a deep sadness for this lost young man. Thomas, your father loved you. He talked about you all the time, how proud he was of your technological innovations, how you were pushing the company forward into the digital age. He bragged about you constantly. Thomas looked up, genuine surprise in his eyes. He did? All the time, James confirmed. Dad wasn't great at expressing his feelings directly, you know that. But he was incredibly proud of you. Thomas swallowed hard. I miss him so much, he said, his voice barely a whisper. And yesterday, watching Rebecca and Michael try to tear apart his final wishes, it just felt so wrong. I couldn't sleep last night thinking about it. So you came here, Eliza said gently. I came to say I'm sorry and that I accept Dad's will completely. Not just because I have to, but because it's what he wanted. And I came to ask. He hesitated again. I came to ask if we could start over. If you'd give me a chance to be the brother-in-law you deserve, not the one you've had to put up with. Eliza looked at James, who gave a small nod, the decision entirely hers. She thought of Samuel's letter, his hope that in time his children might see what he saw in her. Perhaps that time was beginning now with Thomas. I'd like that, she said finally. I think your father would like that too. Relief washed over Thomas's face. Thank you, he said simply. Would you like some coffee? Eliza offered, gesturing to the pot James had made earlier. We were just about to have breakfast. Actually, Thomas said, looking slightly embarrassed, I brought bagels. They're in the car. I wasn't sure if you'd even let me in the door. James laughed, the tension in the room dissipating. Go get them. We have plenty of cream cheese. As Thomas hurried out to his car, James pulled Eliza into a tight embrace. Are you sure about this? He murmured against her hair. No, she admitted. But it's a start. And I think it's what your father would have wanted, for his family to find a way forward together. James kissed her gently. You continue to amaze me, Eliza Thornton. Your capacity for forgiveness, for seeing the best in people. It's why Dad loved you. It's why I love you. Even when your sister calls me a gold digger, she asked, only half joking. Especially then, he smiled. Because anyone who really knows you knows how ridiculous that accusation is. Rebecca and Michael will come around eventually, or they won't. Either way, we have each other, we have Thomas apparently, and we have Dad's blessing. That's more than enough. Thomas returned with a bag of assorted bagels, and the three of them sat at the kitchen island, an impromptu breakfast that felt like the beginning of healing. They talked about Samuel, sharing stories and memories, finding common ground in their grief and their love for the man who had brought them together. As Eliza watched James and his younger brother laughing over a story about their father's infamous dislike of technology, she felt a sense of peace settle over her. Samuel had known exactly what he was doing with his will, with his letter. It wasn't about the money or the property. It was about legacy, about values, about bringing his fractured family together even after he was gone. The Nantucket house would be there waiting when they were ready. The books would be read and cherished. The shares in the company would be used as Samuel intended, to guide Thornton Enterprises back to its founding principles of integrity and innovation. And perhaps, in time, even Rebecca and Michael would find their way back to the family table. For now, though, this was enough, this moment of connection, of new beginnings. Eliza caught James's eye across the table and smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes for the first time since Samuel's death. He smiled back, love and gratitude evident in his expression. Samuel Thornton had given her many gifts in their short time together, but the greatest was this, the knowledge that family wasn't defined by blood, but by love, by choice, by showing up when it mattered most. In defending her to his siblings, in choosing her over his inheritance if necessary, James had honored his father's legacy in the most meaningful way possible. And as the morning sun streamed through the kitchen windows, illuminating the three of them sharing bagels and memories, Eliza knew that somewhere, Samuel was smiling.